Well, hello to our St. Paul's friends and family. Hope that you've been participating with us in these 40 days of listening. And as I told you on Sunday, we're going to be doing some different things. And a part of that variety is just some dialogue with leaders in our community. And I'm excited to have with us today Dr. Jim Bankston, who is Pastor Emeritus here at St. Paul's United Methodist Church, and good friend Harvey Clemens from Pleasant Hill Ministries in the 5th Ward. So we get to have a dialogue, a conversation together. So I want to, just a few questions for you all. If Harvey, we were talking a few minutes ago about meeting somebody on the golf course, and by the third hole you know who they are and all, but how would you introduce yourself to someone for the first time?
Well, if I was on the golf course, it'd be a little bit different from what it is on this setting right here, but typically I would just say that my name is Harvey Clemens, Jr., and if they pursue further, then I would say I am the son of Mr. and Mrs. Harvey Clemens, and I was born in 5th Ward. And if they kept on going, then I'd say, well, okay, I'm the pastor of the Pleasant Hill Baptist Church in Houston, Texas.
All right.
37 years.
37 years.
That's right.
How about you, Jim?
I usually start off by saying these days I am a retired United Methodist clergy, and I've pastored various churches around Texas, East Texas, and the Houston area. Moved to Houston for the first time in 1981. So I've been around Houston for almost 40 years now, and I was here at St. Paul's for almost 19 years. Born and raised in East Texas, and I have seen a lot of our state and love this church, love this man here.
Now, so both of you all have been around. Harvey, your whole life you've been here in Houston.
Yes,
Jim, you've been here a significant amount of time. What do y'all think is the most, in your time here in Houston, what do you think is the most significant change that's happened in our city?
Well, growing up in Houston, and I'm now 69 years old, so you can imagine I've seen a number of things. I think the most significant thing that I look back on is the diversity of the city. I can remember as a child going to the rodeo parade as a kid, and essentially in that crowd was, pretty much blacks, whites. I'm sure there were others, but perhaps maybe we didn't have the intelligence to be able to separate whether they were Hispanic, but, blacks, whites. But now, when you look at our city, it's cosmopolitan. I mean, if you want art, you want science, you want sports, you want, it's all here. Every ethnic group, different cultures. It's just a wonderful place to live. I can't think of any other place, any other city that I'd rather be living in than Houston.
I think Houston is now the most diverse city in the country now, and so
according to the scholars over at Rice, that's what their work reveal is, that we're perhaps maybe the most diverse city in the United States.
If you'd asked me that question, I think that'd be my answer too, that the diversification of Houston has been phenomenal. The world has moved to Houston. Every ethnicity, every race, every nationality. We have large segments that are represented within our larger population. And I think, part of the challenge has been, we knew one way of living together, black and white.
Right.
It wasn't the best way.
Right.
But we knew one way of living together, black and white. And while we try to perfect that relationship, which we have some perfecting to do, we are also trying to understand how we live in this wonderful community with the huge diversity of people of every hue and color and religious background that makes us a world-class city and an extremely diverse city. Hopefully we can call ourselves a community in which we everybody finds a place to have the fullness of life, an opportunity to live that out.
But you know, Jim,
Yeah.
the other remarkable thing is, while other cities across these United States were having very bad riots and racial tensions, and please do not misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting by any means that Houston has not had its own problems, but I'm saying to the degree that Los Angeles, Chicago, and some of the other cities have really had major issues in this area. Thank God for the leadership that has existed over the years in Houston that has kept us from experiencing a lot of the devastation that we could have experienced.
Yeah, I think that's true, and who knows what all the motivations were for that.
Right.
A lot of it was economic, but it was the business community and the religious community,
Right.
to a large extent, working together to find those compromises and those concessions and that way forward that allowed our community to avoid some of the turmoil that other nations have had. And we're still, trying to nudge this along, maybe a little faster than a nudge these days, which we need to.
Well, if this is an experiment in terms of our diversity compared to some others, cities across the nation, the burden of getting it right really falls upon us.
Yeah.
I mean, and when I say upon us, I'm not just speaking of the clergy community. I'm speaking of the entire populace. I think it's incumbent upon us to then be the example of what we should be, as opposed to the example of what we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I think that's where Israel fell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is when God chose him and said, "You are my chosen people." Not that they were any better or any worse than anybody else, but they were the individuals that God chose to set an example of, if you keep the covenant, I'll keep my end, and we'll win the rest of the world by the relationship that you and I have. And so I think that it's incumbent upon us as a city, as a people, we really need to get this right.
Well said.
So if you, Harvey, if you draw that conclusion forward, or that metaphor forward, in thinking about Israel and a chosen people, and what are significant things that still need to happen, and how can our city and our communities be a leader in those significant things that still need to happen?
Well, if you read Walter Brueggemann's work on the traditions of Jeremiah, Brueggemann said, if you ask the economists why Judah fell, they say because they didn't understand how to deal with the economy. If you ask the military strategists why Judah fell, they said because they didn't understand how to conduct military strategy. But if you ask the man of God why Judah failed, he would say because they failed to keep Deuteronomy. And I think it's important for us, while we look at the issues that we're confronting, to not break the yellow leaf off the shoot and think that we've gotten to the problem. I think it's important to look at the root problem and the root cause. Yes, there are racial injustices. Yes, there are prejudices. Yes, there are economic disparities. Yes, COVID-19 has pointed out to us that there is a gap between minorities and poor in terms of the general population. And so if we try to solve each one of those issues, and we only deal with trying to change policing or we only deal with trying to change legislation, and we don't deal with the heart of humans, we're breaking the yellow leaf off the shoot. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't vote. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't be trying to look for reform, in policing, all of that. But those are surface issues. The root issue is the heart of men and women, because it's the heart that shows up, at the country club, around the dinner table, in the private areas, where people say what they can say in private that they would not say in public.
Yeah.
That's where the battle, I think, has to be won.
Yeah, be hard to argue with that. Whatever happens in the heart influences what we do. And, if you and I can't love each other, if you and I can't respect each other, if you and I can't come to an understanding that we are equal in every way and we all deserve an equal opportunity in life, then we don't get very far. It has to start there. I do think in addition to that, I think as a community, there are a couple of things that I think we need to emphasize going forward. And they address what we're facing right now, but over the long term. So I think these are kind of long-term solutions that nevertheless we need to look at. I think we have to improve our educational system.
Absolutely.
Every child in this city has to have an opportunity to learn, to develop, to be an educated citizen in our community and in this world. And our schools have to be quality, first-rate in every way. The teachers have to be supported and respectful of all the students. We have all that diversity in our city. They show up in our schools. Mm-hmm. And so I really think an equal opportunity at education is absolutely necessary. And the other thing that I think we could do is livable wages. Mm-hmm. Who in the world could live on minimum wage? You just cannot do it. We have to find a way. And that comes from the heart in some cases. If you don't make a law, then from the heart, people who employ people need to find a way to pay people that work for them a livable wage. And we all have to do that at every level. And I think if people had a good education that launches them into life, and if they had enough income from a livable wage for a job well rendered, then it would help us as we try to find our way being together as a community as we move forward.
There is no evidence that reveals that education does not help you to have civility.
Yeah.
It's, I think it's very important for us to develop early childhood education programs. We did a study a few years ago in the schools that, in the feeder patterns of Fifth Ward, and we looked at how those schools were funded. We looked at the funds that were coming into those schools and how they place weight on the particular programs. And one of the things that was revealed is that the schools who were doing the best were getting the most money because the program was weighted toward, advanced students. Students who were achieving. So they were able to put more programs. Students who were failing were getting less dollars. And so when you hear people in the protests and these movements use these phrases, systemic problems, what they're trying to reach at is they're saying is it doesn't matter whether you come from a home who has a desire to educate their children. If you put them into a particular program that is within their community, and given the kind of systemic problems that exist within school districts, is that they already start, two steps back in the queue.
Yeah. Yeah.
What you know, these past 3 weeks have been tumultuous times in our country. What do you all think will be the lasting legacy of the protest and of George Floyd's life and death?
You're asking me to be a fortune teller now and a prophet, and
You can do that.
I'm neither one of those. But I can tell you what I hope.
That'd be great.
Yeah. I would hope that this moment, as it appears now, it appears that our city, our nation, is not seeing it as a particular issue that is perpetrated upon black people that black people have to fight for. It appears now, when we look at the movement, that it is made up of all ethnicities, all age ranges, all economic backgrounds, who are coming together to say, this is a hideous crime, cannot any longer be accepted, and we must do something. And here's what I think is important. We must do something not because of what it is perpetrated upon blacks, and it is, Hispanics, poor, but we must do something because even though it's perpetrated upon a select group, it's a counsel on everybody. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is, and it comes from this basic idea. I will never be all that I am meant to be as long as you're not all that you were meant to be. Yeah. Yeah. And I think when we get that in our head.
Yeah, I'm hopeful too that the diversity of the kinds of people that we see in the protest will move us toward a greater rate of change. I just think, from the first time that first African slave set foot on America, through hundreds of years of slavery, to finally fight a civil war to supposedly end it, we have made only very incremental changes, and we've been nudged or pushed or brought unwillingly for every step we've taken many times along that long journey. And I just think we have to make more deliberate steps. We have to make them together. We can't just say, we'll think about that. We have to have action now, and we have to move at a greater speed than we have in the past. I started the first grade in 1954. Mm-hmm. We didn't have kindergarten, so I started the first grade in 1954, which was the year of Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, mm-hmm. to desegregate the schools with the phrase, all deliberate speed. And my little community put it off as long as they could, for 11 years. Mm-hmm. And my senior year in high school, we integrated our schools. Right. It took that long. Right. We can't take that long. We don't have that luxury. People aren't going to stand for it and shouldn't. Yeah. We'll have to take faster steps and move to greater understandings of equality and brotherhood and sisterhood in our community. We have to do it.
I think I agree with you.
What are the folks at St. Paul's? What do we need to do here to bring about this needed change?
An individual could get dwarfed in.
I think that's the way that people feel. I mean, I know that's the way I feel. What can I do?
What do I do? Do I go march? Do I stay at home? What do I do? And I want to get back to that heart thing.
Yeah.
Because, I think it was one of the things that Martin Luther King said, one of the greatest tragedies of the civil rights movement was not Bull Connors and people who were putting the dogs on you and people who were beating you with the
nightsticks and fire hoses.
Right. It was those individuals who were staying at home and did nothing. Good people They just didn't know what to do. They didn't know whether to get involved. They it will work itself out. Well, it won't. Yeah. It will not work itself out. And I think each of us have to become a committee of one in our own small circles, because all of us have racism within our own families, within our own circles of influence. And a lot of times when we hear little things, we'll laugh it off as it is a joke, even though we know that that's not what I really feel in my heart. We'll just laugh it off as it is a joke, and we'll let it go on. That kind of stuff festers.
Yeah.
And I think we have to attack it. We have to attack it at our closest point of reference, to our relatives, our loved ones, our children, and say, this is not the right way. You say you're a person of faith. You say you believe in God. How do you square this with the text? And I think that as each Christian make that decision, they don't then start looking for the people who are leading the movement. I would really like to be with this, but I can't get with Black Lives Matter. Well, it's not about Black Lives Matter. It's about right and wrong. It's about darkness and light.
I think, you ask about St. Paul's and spread that out across other, let's say, predominantly white churches. I think conversations like this help.
Right.
I
agree.
Maybe the first conversation is with myself. I have to ask myself, where is it that I have some stereotypes or some prejudices that I must address, that I have to reconsider what I have thought or still think, and how can I move beyond that? And if I have that conversation with myself, then maybe a conversation with my family, to make sure my children and my extended family knows who I am, and that we can talk about together, family now, some of the stereotypes and prejudices that are a part of our family culture. And then when we've done that sufficiently, and maybe not take too long, conversations with those who are different from me. And difference means economic opportunity, skin color, things like that. At many levels, we are very much alike.
Sure.
We want lots of the same things, but for those things that divide us, we have to talk about what those things are with those who are not exactly like us. Jeff preached a sermon not too long ago. You didn't know I was going to say this, about Jesus meeting the woman at the well. And he said that the woman who came to Jesus had some Jewish roots, but she was a little bit different, a little bit different, so much so that the society around her shunned her. And we're going to have to get over not treating people who are a little bit different as if they are totally other. Good word, Jeff, by the way. I remember that one well.
Jeff, would you send me your notes?
Preachers always looking for material.
Be glad to. I think about, maybe it's that every day we need to pray that psalm, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me.
Right. That was going to be the next point that I was going to make, Jeff, is, I think if we are honest and brutally honest, all of us have run across somebody that we didn't like.
Yeah.
And if someone were to ask you the real question, is like, what do you have against this, that, and the other? Those are real human kinds of relationships and things that form. And when you ask that question, sometimes, and it doesn't have to be a person of a different race, it could be a person of your same
family.
Family.
That's
you
right.
ask that question, and oftentimes you can't come up with any concrete, real reason. It's just that I don't have it. So if that is something that happens to humans, God has given us something for that. is first of all to acknowledge it. That's the conversation, self talking to self.
Yeah.
And the other part, acknowledge it that it's wrong, but it's the way I feel, and I'm gonna need help dealing with it. And if I can go to God to heal me when I'm physically sick, I ought to be able to go to Him and ask for healing when I am morally and spiritually sick.
Yeah.
You know, and that should become a real prayer. And I've found myself, without being political, praying for our current administration, saying, Lord, help him to be better.
Yeah.
A better person,
Yeah.
better leader, you know.
Yeah.
I think we have to, if we're true to ourselves, I think all of us have had to ask God, God, help me deal with this employee better.
Yeah.
Help me deal with this
Church member.
church member better.
Well, you know, I like the way you put that in a spiritual context. You know, we're talking Christian people trying to work this out.
Yeah.
And we have a guide in Jesus.
Yeah.
And we just simply have to follow Jesus better.
Yeah. And I think you guys ought to, by the way, Jim, I've been watching you and the work you've done here. You know, we've been involved with ADL. You know, we sat on several committees together. You know, I think being involved with people who have had those experiences and gone through certain levels of deprivation where you can understand, not really understand, I think that minimizes, but you have some empathy for what they have gone through.
Right.
You know. I remember one time I was in New York and I wanted to see a play and I hadn't picked one out, so I passed by and they had the story of Anne Frank's diary being played, and I knew it only by its name and because I had read the book early on when I was a child, but I forgot about how heavy it was. And I went in and I saw this play. And I walked out of there saying, I didn't come to New York to go in and see a play that's going to be that heavy. I feel more down than I did when I went out. And the question that kept coming to my mind is, how can one man kill and create this much havoc on the planet? Only to have that question answered for me today is when we don't use our checks and balances, when justice and law has gone out the window.
Yeah.
When good people sit back and let wickedness survive.
Yeah.
I don't think we have no other choice. I don't think God has any other choice but to step into the affairs of man.
Yeah.
Because if God does not step in to the affairs of man, we will destroy ourselves. You know,
We're working on it.
We're working on it. But I believe that God has a plan.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why we can preach every Sunday, because we believe that we have hope.
Yeah, that's right. I think we
have hope.
We have to maintain hope. And I am hopeful. I am hopeful in all the young people that I see involved in being concerned about what's happening in our world and in moving us toward that place where, as Martin Luther King said, we live out the full intention of our founding documents. Yeah. And I really do see a lot of young people that intend for that to happen in our communities, in our nation, very soon. And I'm encouraged about that.
I am.
I really do think, it's time for a lot of, not me and you, but a lot of older people to kind of move out of the way and let the younger people take over.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I get a lesson every time I sit around the dinner table with my children.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Children.
what I think is a given, they don't quite see it as a given.
I know.
And it's helpful.
Yeah.
It is very helpful to me.
Yeah.
You know, and
They're going to lead us through this.
Yeah.
Now, I'm
yeah.
hopeful in that regard.
And hopefully my experiences are helpful to them.
Yeah, that's right. And I do think there's, you know, that if there's not any wisdom in these 70-something years, there ought to be a little anyway.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing that you can assume about an old man is that he's a survivor.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I know you all are busy, and Harvey, you've got a lot going on. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming today.
Thank you, Harvey.
And visiting with us. Yeah. Here's the thing, and we have emailed and talked, and so when you were decided to come over here, what's the question that you said, oh, I hope Jeff asked me this so that I can answer it this way?
I think you've asked all of the right questions. I would say to the St. Paul family, I appreciate the leadership that you're giving to the city, not just in one particular area, but in all of the areas where we're dealing with, suffering humanity, feeding people who are hungry, taking a stand on injustices and injustice. I think you all are positioned in the right place and continue to do the work. I would just simply say is let's continue to put our shoulder to the plow and continue to have dialogue as we've had. I think, Jeff, I look forward to our relationship and our getting to know one another better and joining in some of the work together that Pastor Bankston has been involved in. It's time. It's our time. There's not been a generation that has not had to fight for righteousness from the first century to the 21st century. And so it's our time. We must fight the good fight. Wherever darkness is, light is obligated to shine.
I think I would say to the St. Paul's community, let's ask the question, what's the next step? We don't have to solve everything overnight. We need to move pretty quickly, but let's just think about the next step, and let's think seriously about what that looks like for us as individuals and for us as a church. And let's take that next step with commitment and with sensitivity and with courage.
I think we need to educate ourselves on the candidates. We need to educate ourselves on the laws and the procedures for voting.
Yeah.
So that our votes don't get stolen or they don't get suppressed. And we vote for the person who is most likely to support our Judeo-Christian values and views and good for the nation. Voting, 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 voting.
Bless you. Good word. Good word. I'm going to ask Jim if you'd close us with a word of prayer.
All right. I would ask you to hold hands, but we're not doing that these days, are we? We'll just pretend that we're touching each other. Yeah. Dear God, we're so grateful for the opportunity to have a conversation. And we pray that conversations from the heart would change hearts. And that we would allow the inspiration that you put into us to cause us to live the kind of lives that you would have us live.
Please, God.
Enable us to take the next step, to speak to one another, begin with ourselves, our families, those in our neighborhoods, those we work with, those around the water cooler, those that live somewhere in this city where I don't live, but sometimes I run into them. Let's talk, let's love, and let's move forward together. And indeed, allow us, oh God, to make this our country the country you would have it to be, and this our city the city you would have it to be. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.